Since it's 7:05, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. So this is the Milton's Master Plan Implementation Committee's October 26th meeting. And I will ask all of us to introduce ourselves. So I'm Cheryl Tagayas. I'm the chair. Then I'll go to Elaine.
Elaine, a member.
And Roxanne.
Roxanne Musto, Select Board member.
And Dick.
Dick Burek, appointed member.
And staff, Josh.
Josh Lee, Assistant Town Planner.
And we know that member Tabor Keeley is unavailable this evening, and we're trying to see whether new member Regina Campbell Malone is able to sign in. So hopefully we'll see her join us shortly, because the first thing on our agenda is to welcome her. So we will have to postpone that item of our agenda. Our next meeting dates are November 14th and December 12th. I think we've already discussed those a number of times, so I'll just put those back out there. Hopefully everyone can still attend. And then next we'll move on to the approval of meeting minutes. And I will make a note that I coordinated with Josh this week to make sure that we're up to date on the website with our meeting minutes and our agenda. So thank you, Josh, because we certainly are up to date thanks to you on our meeting minutes. And so did everyone get a chance to look at the September 14th meeting minutes?
Yes.
Anybody have any amendments? If not, then I will take a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 14th.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Elaine?
Yep.
Roxanne?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
And myself, the chair, yes. And next we'll move on to staff update. Our staff person, Josh, had surgery recently, so we're going to allow him to be very, very brief, and we'll try and hold any questions or comments to a minimum. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, apologies in advance if I'm not my usual clear self. I'm also speaking through a mask on Northeastern's campus, so that adds another layer. The primary item on our staff update is in regards to the parking study at Town Center and the library. Cheryl and Tim, our plan director, have been in email contact about this plan, but Regina has just joined the waiting room.
Oh, great.
Provided a two-phase scope for the study per the sort of request from the library trustees for a swift first step that looks exclusively at library parking, and then a second broader scope that looks at the town center sort of post fire station sort of construction impacts on town center parking. So that I believe will be an agenda item at your next meeting, but and we will send around those scopes if they are not changed before then for your review. And we'll be looking for potential funding from MNPIC for those studies.
Thank you, Josh. Questions for Josh, anyone? No. Okay, Regina, we're going to jump back to our item 1 on our agenda. So welcome our new member, Regina Campbell Malone. So Regina, in the event that you don't know all of us, I'm going to ask everyone to go around the room and say a few words, not just our names. So I will start with Josh Lee, who's our staff support for the committee.
Sorry, I'm jumping between minutes and this. My name is Josh Lee. I use he, him pronouns. I am the assistant town planner. I'm in the planning and community development department on the second floor of town hall if you ever need to see me. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thanks for your helpful emails too.
Roxanne.
Hi, my name is Roxanne Musto. I'm a member of the Select Board, member of the Board of Health. I'm your Select Board representative to the MPIC. Welcome.
Thank you, Roxanne.
And Elaine.
Hi, Elaine. I am a member since January, also on the Personnel Board, and use she, her pronouns. Welcome.
And Dick?
My name is Dick Burke. I'm a appointed member to the committee. I was a member of the Master Plan Committee, the original Master Plan Committee, and have served on the traffic mitigation, not traffic mitigation, the Master Plan Implementation Committee since then. I've also been a member of the Traffic Mitigation Committee and the East Milton / Barrett study. That's pretty much it. Welcome aboard, Regina.
And Regina, I'm Cheryl Tagayas. I'm the representative from the planning board. And I have been the chair of the committee since its inception. So we chug along at the pace that I set. So if anybody has any questions, there's some new members here. So I take a lot of this information sort of for granted since I've been at it along with Dick since the Master Plan Committee in 2013. So this material is something I've been familiar with for a while. So if any questions, just anyone raise your hand because we're going to be going through some detail tonight. So welcome, Regina. And Regina, do you want to just give us a couple of words yourself? What interests you in the committee, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Yes, I am always looking for ways to bring my experience and expertise to bear in the public sphere. I am very community oriented. And in my regular occupation as a scientist and science teacher, I do research and have tons of experience doing research, pouring through citations, and learning pretty quickly on the job. So my hope is not that I bring a ton of planning board experience, but that I bring a willingness to represent all the citizens of Milton, especially in my precinct 1, and to be a voice with different background and experiences from everyone that's present. So thank you for the warm welcome, and I'm looking forward to hopefully contributing in any way I can.
Great, thank you and welcome. Okay, so now we are going to move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the discussion and recommendation for one open committee seat. So we have, as you know, the committee members know that I reached out to 6 remaining candidates, and we heard affirmatively from 3. So we are now considering 3 of those who originally applied, Jonathan Lashley, Warren Lizio, and Demetrios or Jim Davis. So what I did before when we did this was I asked each member just to give a few words about who they might suggest for this open seat, and then we can have an open discussion about it. So I will first go to Elaine.
I mean, I think all 3 candidates are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn between 2 that really stood out to me, being Warren Lizio, real estate development, property management, strong focus in fair housing. I believe Warren's in precinct 7, which, you know, I'm also in, so there's that. But you know, John Lashley was another one that I think has an incredible experience in project management and other areas. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing what my fellow members feel are strong points too.
Okay, next.
Making
All right. Thank you, Elaine. Next, I'll go to Dick.
Thanks, Cheryl. And I think we'll just look very quickly looking at the resumes. All these candidates are very qualified, and I certainly applaud their interest in serving on the committee. But I was uncomfortable with the way we handled this last meeting. It's hard for me to actually weigh in and recommend someone just based on a resume without meeting them and asking them questions. So if it's okay, I think I'm going to just take a pass on recommending anyone and going along with the wishes of the board, of the committee.
Okay. And how about you, Roxanne?
Sorry, just had to unmute.
Okay.
So for first of all, I wanted to thank the 3 remaining people that are still interested in being on it. I think they all definitely have good qualifications. I guess I would say, looking at the qualifications, we had somebody who stepped down who was in precinct 7. I think Warren Lizio has a lot of interesting background that would be appropriate for this committee. So I do like the background that he has. And another choice for me is actually Jim Davis because of the construction background. Mr. Lashley is very qualified as well. However, we have you, Cheryl, and you're an architect, and I think that serves the good purpose. So I like to have a little variety, a little more representation. So I would say Warren Lizio would probably be the one that I would go with on this for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tabor, sorry, Josh, did Tabor send you any kind of indication? No, okay. I had offered him that opportunity to send it to Josh if he had some. And Regina, I know you're new to this, so if I give you an opportunity to speak, if you'd like to this.
No, I'm happy to abstain.
Okay, all right, so I'll just add that I think all 3 candidates are well qualified, highly qualified, and all would do well. And so it is pretty tough, to make a recommendation, I think, as Dick said. And well, Roxanne, I do appreciate the fact that you mentioned I'm an architect. I'm actually thinking someday it'll be nice to have someone else who steps into the architect's seat, although that's not just yet. I do think, I wish and I hope that we'll get all 3 of these folks to engage with us as we go forward, because one of the things that we know that we will need to do is to discuss whether we think the plan should be updated. And if it should be updated, we're going to probably look at a large committee for that. When Dick and I served on the master plan committee, I think there were something like 14 people, perhaps 16. It was a large group, and it was representative of a lot of different interests, because the plan itself is a lot more than just planning and architecture, because it has a lot of other pieces to it that we'll discuss. So I would say that Mr. Lizio did provide us with some additional information this time about his background in the South End and his participation in some various and I guess I would say kind of diverse aspects of living in the city and living in Milton. And so I would agree with the 2 of you who suggested him. And so I would be, as I said, it's not an easy decision, and we have to make one and make a recommendation. And so I would be supportive of putting forth Mr. Lizio to the Select Board and Planning Board if others are inclined to do that. And then again, I would encourage Mr. Davis and Mr. Lashley to continue to follow our meetings, and hope that we can reach out to them and ask for their input at various steps along the way. Any other, Dick, do you have any comments, discussion now?
No, I certainly agree with everything that's been said. I said it's just really the process to me is was a little. I was just uncomfortable. I don't really like to weigh in on personalities and background without actually meeting the people. I think that's just my own personal bias.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is relatively new also is doing this discussion sort of in the public meeting. I think sometimes in the past there's been sort of like a ballot kind of vote. And so, but this is the way that we are advised that it has to be done in open discussion. So, and if there's any, is there any further discussion? Would anybody like to make a motion if there is no further discussion? No further discussion, okay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll motion that we put forth Warren Lizio as our recommendation to an appointment to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, to the Planning Board and Select Board.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor, Elaine Benson,
Yes.
Roxanne Musto,
Yes.
Dick Burke,
Yes.
Regina Campbell Malone,
Abstain.
and Cheryl Tagayas, yes. All right, Josh, you will please pass that on to the select board and the planning board. Thank you. Okay, so now a brief overview of the master plan. I wanted to just mention that this is the implementation component of it. So the plan itself is 3 volumes, very lengthy, lots of data, lots of background, a lot of discussion about the process that went into developing the plan. I think that's in the volume 3. But volume 1, the implementation plan, is this committee's focus. And that really begins with where the vision statement is, and then the master plan goals, and then the implementation strategies to achieve the goals. And so that's what we've been focused on throughout our inception. Sometimes we've delved into a component of it in much more detail, like in the Milton Village and the Milton Landing, which was probably a several-year effort in helping advance that planning and zoning. In other pieces of it, we've provided funding to, like the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, for example. So while we haven't led that planning effort, it is something where we've helped provide funding. So the committee's generally asked town meeting for $30,000 to $50,000 a year in appropriation to be used to help implement the plan. And that's usually in the form of studies and plans. And sometimes it's a matching piece, and other times it's the sole source of the funding. And so we still have funds available in this fiscal year, and that'll be a topic of an agenda item in either November or December's meeting. And then, I think as has been discussed recently, because of these 2 open seats, the committee has a 10-year duration, and there's a question of whether it can be extended if town meeting chooses to extend it. Of course, we would have to make the request for that. And so we'll need to discuss that as we get, my thought is as we get through, we've already covered the strategies and related to goals number 1 and 2 at our prior meeting in September. Tonight, we're going to discuss the strategies related to goals 3 and 4. And if we have time, I'd like to get into 5 if we have time. And then our next meeting, we'll be discussing 6 and 7 and potentially 5 if we haven't covered it tonight. And so once we've discussed all of that, I think we'll have a better idea of where we think we are with the plan, how far we've advanced with it, and whether the committee feels as if it needs more time for its current implementation before deciding it's time to ask for the plan to be updated. So those are decisions we're going to have to make in the next year and a half or 2. The other piece about that would be, because of this sort of funding allocation, is developing a new master plan does take funding. When it was done in 2013 and 2014, it was about $125,000. So that's a much larger ask and appropriation. And I've asked Josh and Tim to take a look at what the cost might be, if that would be. The plan before this one had not been updated since the 1970s. So I'm hoping that the plan going forward this time wouldn't be quite as extensive, because it would have been, some of the data would be far more recent. So we'll see about that. So we'll be discussing these things that I just mentioned a bit more in our next 2 meetings, I would say, as we finish evaluating the status. So with that, I think, unless there's any questions about that, I'm going to do a screen share and go right to the spreadsheet. So before I do that, any questions? No. Okay, great. Was everybody able to access the spreadsheet through the shared drive? The town shared drive? Good, okay. Sorry, give me 1 second. Are you seeing the spreadsheet now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's not in the right spot.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm working on a laptop, so I have lots of little things I'm moving around here to make sure I can see this properly. All right, so one thing, we ended last time with goal 2, but one thing it didn't have, when I looked at this today, Roxanne, was whether we agreed to on 2.2.9. I plugged in true here. I don't know if you had any record of that or recollection of that discussion, because all of these were false as of today.
I think so. I mean,
Because you had supplied this, I think, information here that's in this notes column, right? And so I think we do believe that this started. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay, great. So I just wanted to make sure. All right, so then on goal 3 is improve housing and neighborhoods, including preserving existing housing and being proactive in providing a wider range of housing types to meet a variety of needs and preferences. So the way we've been going through this, Regina, is there's a committee member assigned to each of these goals, and sometimes the committee members are knowledgeable about it because of the responsible party is the party that is the person's representing, like myself with planning board. Other times it's a committee member who's done outreach to other committees or town staff to get updates. So in this case, a lot of these relating to the planning board, so I'm familiar with the progress on these. And so I looked at all these again. 3.1.1, it's summarized here, but if you actually go to the plan itself, there's a number of things that are actually listed under that category, under the spreadsheet in the implementation plan. And so these topics here are these notes that I put into the side relate to all of the bullet points that are under 3.1.1, for example. And so one of them had to do with preserving existing housing stock. When our housing stock, much of it was built before zoning was adopted, means that a lot of it is pre-existing non-conforming. And so the process for making changes to structures that are in that form used to be only by variance. And so the planning board did work on some zoning articles that made a few changes, and one that made that process a special permit process rather than a variance process. And so that was done in 2018, and that addresses part of that goal. And then another part of that goal is was the zoning that this committee and the planning board worked on in Milton Village. And so my sense about how far we've come in this particular goal is that I think we're at least at 50% of that goal being met. And part of that, I think there's still some more work to be done. And I'm going to get to scroll on my other screen here to where that is. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, there's a bullet point that deals with enforcing regulations for landlords to keep their properties up to code. And I don't know whether there's been any advancement on that. That's something where I need to check in with the building department. So that's why, oh, Josh, do you have an answer to that? Please.
Yes, that has been a discussion at the planning board briefly as part of some of our staff updates. We spoke with Joe Prondak, the building commissioner, about a minimum maintenance bylaw that would sort of do this role and fill this goal. And the building department does not have staff capacity to enforce a minimum maintenance bylaw were we to implement it. So unless it came with additional staffing capacity and inspection services, that is not within staff capacity at this time.
Okay, so Josh, maybe you can add to this under the notes section when you get an opportunity with that update. Another bullet point is reducing parking requirements for multifamily in areas that are close to transit stations. And that's what was done in Milton Village. So that's why that's listed here. Any questions about 3.1.1, preserving the existing housing stock? No, okay. 3.1.2 is facilitating the preservation, including adaptive reuse of the many large pre-depression era homes that could be repurposed. So one of the recommendations there was to adopt a great estates bylaw, which was adopted. And I guess already it was 2017, so it's some time ago. The planning board did also work on a condominium conversion bylaw revision that would allow for parcels on smaller lot parcels. We have something which allows condo conversion now, but the lot size has to be 5 acres. And so if we want to allow that to be applied towards homes that are on less than 5 acres, it would take a revision to the bylaw. And so that's something that still needs to be further studied and advanced. So I gave here, again, so a 50% progress having been met. The other thing that was in, no, that's it for this one. Any questions about this one?
Nope.
Okay. 3.2.1 is creating smaller housing units, which would be to meet the decreasing household size. That could be an elder population, it could be a young family population. We've talked about this on the planning board quite a bit. One of the action items is to amend the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. That, as we know, was worked on by the planning board and sent to town meeting, and town meeting sent it to the planning board for further study. The Milton Village PUD does allow for, well, there's no minimum unit size in Milton Village. And so a developer could come in with a proposal to do small units under that overlay zoning. And then the other thing is inclusionary zoning, which would be something broader. Inclusionary zoning is meaning that affordable housing, a certain percentage is mandated. And that is in most of our multifamily. I think it's in all of our multifamily zoning now. It wasn't always. So some of the multifamily that was permitted in Milton didn't always have a requirement to have affordable units. The planning board is supportive of inclusionary zoning. And so this is something that could be, will definitely be looked at in East Milton Square as zoning advances there and beyond. So, so that brings us to, I think I discussed everything there. I gave that as it started because East Milton Square is a large effort that's not complete yet. So I haven't given that a 50% progress. Any questions on that one, 3.2.1? No, okay.
I do have a quick question. It's not necessarily about that provision, but do you, when you say you gave it a certain percentage, is that located on the spreadsheet?
Yes, do you see it here on the columns? I, J, K. This is,
Okay, so it's a true
Yeah.
false for 50% progress.
Right.
Great, thank you, sorry.
okay. Regina, we talked about, well, how do we track all of this? There's so much detail. And if you're a person who deals with a lot of data like this, maybe you'll have some suggestions. Elaine made some suggestions for us recently that we thought were helpful. And if you have some, we're all open to hearing how to help digest this information.
Oh,
communicate.
color is a must. Color is a must.
All right,
Conditional
well, maybe that can be
formatting.
the first thing you do for us. Is
We
help
can
us with
geek
the color.
out. We can geek out on spreadsheets all day.
All right, great. All right, we'll look forward to that. Okay, so 3.2.2 is increase the market rate and subsidize housing for the elderly. And so Milton has a housing production plan, and in that plan, it has a lot of strategies for meeting various housing needs. That plan was updated in 2020. And the planning board and the select board are responsible for implementing that plan. Both boards adopted that plan. And so there are components of elderly housing that are in that plan that should be reviewed by both boards. And then in 2021, town meeting passed an amendment that allows additional affordable units to be permitted at Winter Valley. Those are 100% of the units are affordable there, and they're age restricted. And then this year rather, town meeting approved memory care zoning that will address different part of the elder population in Milton. Milton did not have any zoning that allowed for memory care previously. So that's something that there was a lot of interest in. And so I gave this a 50% progress at least being made on that. I'm not saying that all of the needs are being met yet, but I think good progress is being made on that one. Anybody have any questions or thoughts about that one? All right. Then the next is support and encourage the creation of affordable housing. One of the I think large factors for that is that the CPC or the CPA was passed, and we have a CPC committee now. And the first funding applications have gone in. That requires that at least a third of a certain minimum amount be spent on affordable housing. Yes, Josh, can you give us some more information?
Cheryl, just for correction, it mandates a minimum 10% to community housing.
Okay.
So the Affordable Housing Trust has put in an application for a third of this year's funding to go to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Thanks, Josh. I was being overly, I guess, ambitious with how much money could go towards affordable housing, but we can advocate for that amount. The other two are open space, recreation space, and historic preservation. The other thing is our committee, we help the planning department do a little bit of triage on town-owned parcels to see if any parcels could be suitable for housing. And we turned our initial work over to the planning department for some further consideration. And they have been working to secure some due diligence on a couple of parcels. So that would be wetlands evaluation, getting a survey, and looking at whether some kind of public procurement process could yield housing. And they're working with the Affordable Housing Trust on that. And so we do have some progress on that. On the affordable housing front, we all know about the 40Bs. There's 7, I believe all of them or most of them have been approved. And I can update this. Tim sent me some data about the total numbers of units and the total number of affordable units when we consider all of those. Unless you have those at your fingertips, Josh. You don't have to do it now. Well, we can plug it in.
And
So-
Cheryl, can I interrupt and ask a quick question? I've
Sure.
heard two terms and I just want to make sure that I understand the specificity with which those terms are used. Community housing versus affordable housing. Are those synonyms in this context?
Well, we can talk about affordable housing being affordable to families, where they're spending no more than 30% of their income on
Mhm.
housing, or we can talk about units that are on the subsidized housing inventory, which are certified by the Department of Housing and Community Development. And that's where we're required to have 10% of, well, let's just say, the goal is to have 10% of your housing stock be those units. If you don't have that number of units on the subsidized housing inventory, then it allows for developers to apply for a comprehensive permit under the Chapter 40B law, which removes a lot of the local process from the approval. And what it's yielded is fairly large developments for a town like Milton. And that's what these 40B projects are. Does that help, Regina? Okay, any questions, anyone else? Comments? Okay, so then 3.3.1, developing neighborhood plans for individual neighborhoods. It's not something the planning board's worked on, and I don't believe, Josh, it's anything the planning department's worked on other than our business districts.
That
And
is correct.
that's kind of an interesting one, because what's considered a neighborhood? I mean, you might describe East Milton Square as having a neighborhood, but is it on one side of the highway? Does it include the other side of the highway? What are the boundaries? I don't think there's clear boundaries for neighborhoods. So that's a little bit, I think, sort of, as I thought about that one today, I think that takes a little bit more thought about what people are really hoping to accomplish with that. Because it seems to me as a starting place would be a definition of neighborhood. So is one side of the street a different neighborhood than the other side, like the precincts are, or how would that work? So that's something no progress has been made on. So I'll move on to the next. 3.3.2, it had it's kind of an interesting title here, because what the recommendation is to look at our cluster bylaw. And what the cluster bylaw does is says, okay, if you have, your zoning requires a minimum lot size per unit, you take the parcel and you divide it up and you put the roadway in, and that, as long as you have the right number of size, or the lots that you're putting in place are the right size and they have the right frontage that meet the zoning, then you can put them in under a subdivision application. The cluster says, we want you to preserve open space or possibly preserve a historic structure. So we want you to, or allow you to take your units, the same number of units that you would get as your as of right, but cluster them closer together on smaller lots so that you leave open space that becomes common. And that we had that kind of a bylaw on the books for like 20 years and it was never used because there was never any kind of incentive, if you would, for an applicant to use it. And so that was amended. And the planning board did get applications in under that cluster bylaw. That's technically what the Wolcott Woods is, a cluster. And there's a lot of open space preserved there, particularly at the perimeter and on Canton Avenue. The development on Highland, I think it was Marine Estates, was permitted under that as well. And there may be others that aren't coming to mind at the moment. So I gave that a true because it was a pretty simple, this one's one of those that are pretty simple. Amend your cluster bylaw. It was done. So we can check that off. Okay, on 3.3.3, create neighborhood oriented services. This is an interesting one too, because historically, communities may have had a corner store, and those corner stores were actually let's just say a corner store closed and that business didn't continue or new business didn't pick up pretty soon after, then that would no longer be considered an allowed use because our zoning says it has to be residential in those neighborhoods. And so it's what's considered pre-existing non-conforming. And I heard from people, probably like Dick, who said there used to be more of these sort of corner stores throughout Milton years ago, but they've been lost over time because the zoning doesn't allow for them to exist unless it's pre-existing non-conforming. And so this is something that a couple members of the planning board looked at back in 2016. It's something where there are residents who are interested in this as well, because it's become more difficult through congestion to get to places, to get a quart of milk or stick of butter or whatever small amenity or food item or coffee that people are looking for. So this is something I say was started, and I don't think it advanced very far. So that's something I'd say there's more work that needs to be done. Any questions or comments about that one? Okay, one more for me before we get to Dick. 3.3.4, support neighborhood associations. I would say the residents did this. A couple of residents probably took a greater lead on it, but they formed a coalition of neighborhood associations, and that that umbrella keeps different neighborhood associations informed of issues happening in other neighborhoods. The one thing I would say is not every part of town has a neighborhood association, so it's not 100% complete. Some of them are large, some of them are small, some have meetings that are regularly attended and take minutes, and some don't. So it's a little ad hoc that way, but it has begun. Any questions about that?
Since our since the associations in neighborhoods are listed in our town's master plan, I just wonder if anecdotally there's opportunity to provide more transparency for some of these in terms of who the point of contact is, how do you get involved? I just find it, in East Milton, it's very easy for, they have a Facebook page, and we typically it's very easy to know who runs it and how to join meetings, and but for some of the other ones, it's kind of difficult to understand that. So I just wonder if there's a way to I don't know, just have a little more transparency in terms of the associations that are listed here in this plan.
So I think there was a question about whether the clerk's office or someone in town hall was keeping a list of these associations. Josh, did you find out anything about that?
I don't know whether or not an updated list is being kept. I know we have contact information for most of them within our own sort of internal documentation, but I don't believe that is sort of on a publicly facing site. But I will certainly touch base with the clerk's office and the plan director, and if one doesn't exist, that would be certainly within the bailiwick of our department, and I can get working on creating a database or a landing page that gives that kind of information.
Great. Thank you. Okay. That concludes goal 3, which is improve housing in neighborhoods. Does anybody have any questions? It's sort of a lot, housing in neighborhoods. It's what I think most people think about when they think about where they live, right? So I'm sure there's more that could be said about these, but are we good with this for tonight? Great. Okay, so then we'll move on to goal 4. Let me just get there on my other sheet. Okay. Encourage business promote economic development is goal 4. Strategy 4.1.1 is encourage business investment in commercial zoning districts. And then it says streamline permitting and create a clear guide for doing business. Dick, do you have any comments on this one?
Yeah, I'll be brief on this. Back in 2000, end of 2017 through 2019, I would fairly regularly attend the Chamber of Commerce meetings with Bill Clark as a planning director, and listening to how they were set up, what their organizational structure was like, what their issues were dealing with. And it became very apparent to me after a number of these meetings that what we really needed was a comprehensive and a collaborative approach to dealing with some of these issues. We heard a lot of, not complaints, but issues relative to things that the merchants, and these are mostly East Milton merchants. I think there's a sort of moribund group down in Milton Village and Central Avenue, not to diminish, diminish those areas as business districts, but the central business district, for all intents and purposes, is East Milton. And what came out of it was that the merchants were interested in the town doing certain things, and then in conversations with some of the town officials, the town was interested in the merchants doing some certain things. By that I mean trash and parking, and where do employees park, things in those kind. So fast forward, and I sat down with Mike Zulis in 2000, let's see, probably in July of 2020, and said, does it make sense to put together a group made up of, not to leave anyone out, the planning department, the police department, DPW, as well as landlords, tenants, some members of the immediate neighborhood, but also other members of the town who would be using East Milton, to see if we could come up with some sort of a collaborative approach to dealing with this. Best laid plans always seemed to fall apart at the time. There was some discussions as to who would be the appropriate members, how many people from East Milton, what are the boundaries of East Milton, what constitutes a neighbor of East Milton, to someone who lives on Washington Street, for example. Is that East Milton versus someone who lives on Denmark Avenue, or what are the boundaries, I guess, of East Milton that should be looked upon as immediate butters? And then we want to get other people from other parts of the town who would be using East Milton to let them weigh in as to why they use it, why don't they use it, what are some of their issues. Anyways, long story short, it sort of fell apart. It really never really came together as a group, mostly because of COVID. Not to use excuses, but I think this is something that I'll talk to Mike Zulis again to see if we can get this thing up and going, because as it turns out, there's not finger pointing, but there was a lot of reasons why things weren't happening, and there were lingering issues that to this day still have not been addressed or dealt with. That I think in order to make this thing work, I think that some people think it should, using some other towns, for example, or Belmont, of Needham, of Dedham, Wellesley, how their issues work and how they don't work, to make this thing more of a cohesive effort. So that's a long-winded answer to a pretty straight question. What have you done with this thing? Not much. But we're trying to see if we can reinvigorate this idea and get as many people who are stakeholders, which is a phrase that I think is totally overused, but stakeholders involved in some of the planning process going forward.
Yeah, just I'm going to add a little bit of context to this as well, and Josh, you can jump into it if you'd like. There are some businesses and some properties in East Milton Square that are actually in residential zoning. There are some businesses that exist by special permit or by site plan approval from either the planning board or by the zoning board of appeals. Restaurant parking is handled through the zoning board of appeals. So restaurants also need other kinds of permits. Roxanne is probably familiar through the health department. And so like some towns have a brochure or database or a sort of coordinated town effort of helping a business, like what do you need to do when you want to open up in your town or in our town? So that is something I think maybe on the staff side, Josh, in addition to what Dick's talking about, could be looked at. Another thing is, we've heard quite a bit, is about enforcement. Like if loading is also something that's laid out in permits, but then how is it enforced if trucks aren't using the loading zone or not using it in the hours that they're designated to be used? If employees of businesses are supposed to use the parking that's designated as, I'm forgetting the term,
Service zone.
Yeah, service zone parking. Some people have said, well, employees and owners of businesses are using the spots in front of their business instead of using the surface zone parking. So how is that enforced? Because it's supposed to be 2 hour. So there's a lot of things. So I think that's some of it that you probably talked about too, Dick. So there's kind of that on the permitting side, sort of helping a business get established. I mean, you want to encourage a business in your business district, so you want to make sure that they can succeed. So that it's getting started and then doing well once they open, right?
Right. The idea is to really get an opportunity for everyone to sort of clear the air, so to speak, and, and start blaming other people and other, the town, we had a situation, not to use names, but not too long ago, and maybe Roxanne can remember this, that had one business was having a very hard time remembering to empty their trash barrels. And that was causing a negative situation in the square, and everyone was pointing fingers at each other. Well, whose responsibility is it? Is it the town's responsibility? Is it the landlord's responsibility? Is it the tenant's responsibility? And you think you're dealing with 5-year-olds, but these were issues that really had to be something that should have been able to be dealt with in 5 minutes. Took 5 weeks. Notwithstanding some of the good efforts by the Department of Public Health. So having said that, there are a lot of things like that. And I think you hit a couple, right off the bat in terms of parking enforcement. Do we need some sort of, do we need better parking enforcement? Do we need parking enforcement at all? What do we do with service zone parking with employees working at whatever? Is it okay if someone parks in front of their business for 8 hours and then complains that their customers can't find a place to park to come to visit their business? So I think that all these things sort of come together. I just know in my experience in dealing in some other municipalities on a one-off basis, we can do better. And I think that's what we're trying to do, at least identify the major issues, and then sort of work our way through those and see what we can do collaboratively to come up with a better mousetrap, so to speak, in our one business district. And I think that's, if you only have one, it better be a good one.
Roxanne?
Yes, I just wanted to say, Mr. Burke is absolutely right. We did have an issue with the business over there. And one of the things that we did do also is we talked with Chase Berkeley to add another trash can over there in East Milton, also asking them to empty those more often. So on the town side, we were trying to do that, as well as working with that particular business and telling them they needed more trash receptacles and they needed to show us a program for how they're going to empty that. So there, some of the businesses, it depends what type of business is going in as to what, on the town side, what things need to be implemented and, which departments need to be involved to work with them.
Yeah, it's those little things. They were very visible.
Yeah.
As it came, these little things. Like, for example,
Right.
the town wasn't picking up. It's not a part of their purview to pick up trash during the weekends. I mean, you say, wow, that's when are people in East Milton Square, and when are people? If you don't empty the barrels, where does the trash go? So the trash is there all weekend, which doesn't do a lot with people driving through the town and look at the town and say, how are you running yourself? So I think those are the types of things we want to deal with and really sort of sit down and say, okay, you have a problem. This is how the town can help, but this is how you can help also. And I think that'll go a long way in retaining and attracting good businesses in East Milton Square. Not that all the businesses there aren't good businesses, but we always hear about the idea that we want to get a better mix, and I'm not sure how that's defined, but that could probably come out of the conversation. What would we like to see going forward down there? And there'll be some opportunities, you know, to attract those types of businesses, but you're not going to attract businesses, good businesses, the ones you want, if it doesn't look and act like something they're used to in another town.
So, so I guess what I would say with this one, Dick, is maybe you can get together with Josh and or Roxanne, and there's kind of two pieces to it. I think one is kind of on the permitting side, sort of being friendly to businesses, and then the other is really like kind of on the day-to-day, kind of how businesses are run and managed and enforcement, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think what
Okay.
it comes down to is that, you know, that Tim and Josh are also, we're hats of economic development. So we have to
Right.
figure out if that fits into that definition. What do we have to do to help encourage economic development, right? And
Which gets us to the next one too.
there you go,
4.1.3. I'm gonna keep you moving, Dick.
moving along.
Girl.
Yes, Elaine?
No, just, sorry, I don't mean to stall. I'm just curious if anyone has met with the Milton Chamber of Commerce recently, just to kind of see what efforts they have in place, you know, to encourage, you know, different business and make the business district more desirable. I'm just kind of curious. I mean, they seem like they're an active, you know, group. So just wondering what they've been up to.
Elaine, I haven't, and that's part of my, that's my fault, I guess, to a certain degree. I think that sometimes these business chamber of commerces tend to be fairly myopic in terms of how they view the world as to what they want people to do for them. We're trying to make this more of a collaborative as to what you can do for us, and then this is what we can do for you. And we haven't had that discussion yet. Probably that's something. Josh, are you there, my friend? That's something we probably could get going sooner than later. But as I said, I do have a call into Mike Zulis about sort of figuring out if the original plan of getting these different people together, town and landlords and neighbors together, makes sense. If it does, when should we get going with it?
Thank you, Dick. Chamber of Commerce is a key stakeholder that will be part of the East Milton Square overlay zoning process that is soon to be beginning. So that's certainly going to be a stakeholder that's involved in that discussion. Similarly, the planning department has been working with the police department and traffic commission on streamlining the parking regulations along Central Ave and Elliott Street for simpler enforcement and more robust sort of parking that supports the business district along Central Ave. So we're doing a couple of those things, though we have not reached out to the Chamber of Commerce yet regarding the upcoming overlay zoning process.
So one thing I would say is in the next one, 4.1.3, attracting more diversified commercial establishments. The COVID really put a strain on many communities. A lot of businesses struggled, and there's a lot of empty storefronts in a lot of places because of that. There is ARP money. I think that's what it is, Josh, right? That there were some businesses in Milton were able to apply for, and recently the select board, Roxanne, maybe you could speak to that.
Yes, so there was ARPA funds that were put aside for small business grants, and several businesses have applied for that, and there's we've given out quite a few of them, ranging from $50,000 and below that amount, depending on the need and their applications and so forth. So a subcommittee looked at that, and we just recently approved another round of the ARPA funds for small businesses.
So one thing I think that I'll add here that we can think about, Josh, as I know there's not right now focus on Milton Village. We're hoping that the zoning that was put in place will attract some development that will attract businesses itself. But one of the things that I noticed in other communities is that the commercial space, if you want to have a local business that doesn't have the credit worthiness of, let's say, a bank or maybe a real estate company, you have to be deliberate in your approvals about that, you know, so you have to, and sometimes the developers themselves see that having that kind of a use on their first floor will be beneficial to the rest of their development, right? And beneficial to them coming into the community. So that might mean that they reduce the rent. They give more free rent. They do a build out, or they contribute more to a build out. I saw that where my office was in Fort Point Channel, where Berkeley Investments worked with Joanne Chang to open Flower Bakery. They worked with Barbara Lynch to open her Mentone and the other restaurants she opened there because they needed to have amenities for the people who were going to be either working or renting above. So I think we can get creative with how to attract, because that's always a thing that we hear too. We don't need any more hair salons. We don't need any more real estate offices. You know, we want an ice cream shop. We want a coffee shop. We want a place to run into your neighbor. So we have to be creative about how to get those businesses. So I think I'm hopeful that that discussion can come out of the East Milton Square work, and that can help inform the other two business districts. But Dick, do you have anything else to add on that? Because we were kind of.
No, not really. I think you hit on the button. I think that, you know, part of the job is, you know, I've dealt with some towns that actually do outreach based upon, you know, comments of the residents saying, we want this type of business. We have too many of X. We need something a little different. And that sometimes work. You know, I think, you know, the last thing we want is any empty storefronts. That's not good. You know, that's not good in any business district. It's not good for the town. It's not good economically. So we have to be a little careful how we do things. And I think once again, it goes back to, it's not like a broken record here, sort of a comprehensive approach to how to deal with these things. And that's something hopefully we'll get going the next 2 or 3 months, and, you know, put all these.
Sorry, Dick.
Put all these falses to be trues, I guess, or whatever they are. Okay.
I'm just going to throw out one more example is that, you know how neighbors were supportive of a small commercial space on the former Ice House property on Blue Hills Parkway. And when the town first met with the 40B developer, town officials asked that developer to include a small commercial space. And they did. Josh's predecessor, Allison Quinn, introduced that developer to an operator out of Dorchester who expressed interest in that space, wasn't aware of it before. So she made the introduction between the developer and the operator. And so outreach can make a difference. I don't know. I'm hoping that they still have the interest and hopefully that they or someone else will come and take that space once it's built. But I do think that kind of outreach that you just mentioned, Dick, is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Proactive outreach. Okay, so we'll move now to 4.1.4, address non-conforming uses. I mentioned that related to one of the others. I think that definitely is something that should be revisited, and I would say it doesn't have a lot of progress to date on that. That was, speaking of the ice house, that was a non-conforming use also, because that was an ice house, and then, I mean, in the days of when ice was produced there, and then it was business use after that, business in the big building in the back, residential in the building in the front. So we did address zoning there, so something else could happen, but that zoning was so restrictive to a particular mix of uses that apparently the property owner didn't find a buyer who could make it work, and then they ended up selling to the 40B developer. So we have to be mindful of what we put in place for things like that, that there's a market for the zoning that we put in place. All right. 4.1.5, work with nonprofits to encourage desirable spin-offs. It says support medical offices, which may result from hospital expansion. Consider establishing a healthcare overlay district. That's one bullet point. The next one is to support Curry College efforts in providing additional on-campus housing. Maybe that came at a time when there was pressure in Roxanne's neighborhood with Curry College in terms of what these two bullet points were addressing. I do think Curry may have built since 2013 and 14 some additional on-campus housing. Is that right, Roxanne?
Well, they've built some other buildings too, though.
Okay.
They've built one on towards Brush Hill Road. That's like more administration. I think that's probably their newest building. It's closer to their Atherton Street entrance on Brush Hill, on that section of Brush Hill. But as far as dorms, I don't think they've built something for dorms in a while.
Okay.
That's why I wonder when that point was put up.
Yeah, so
Might
I
be
have to go
old.
back and see if there's more background on that bullet point. I don't see it here, so we have to go back and dig.
Yeah, that might be old.
Yeah, as far as the hospital, we know that they are spinning off the property across Highland for the memory care facility. So that I did put in here and gave it some progress as a result of that. You know, one thing I think that the town has always talked about whether there's a way to diversify our tax base. And one of the things about having a hospital is a medical office, you know, would be a tax paying component of a hospital as compared to the hospital itself. And so if there's any additional capacity, and I don't know if there is, but the town should speak to the hospital and see, because I think if there is room for it, that could be some way to gain commercial tax revenue. So I think that could be on, I'm not sure, select board perhaps to do, is to check in, or maybe planning department check in with the hospital. I'm not quite sure, but it lists as a lead partner is the planning department. So Josh, it puts everything on you and Tim. And then the partners being Curry College and Milton Academy and Milton Hospital.
I've
So
not talked with them previously, but I'm happy to set some stuff up and see what we can do on the planning side of things. You know, we as the town can't really encourage them to do anything. You know, we're not central planning, but I can certainly make some connections and reforge those relationships.
yeah, so I see on some of these where it looks like there hasn't been action and it looks like there needs to be some action. We put a list together of these, which, you know, or we put a color to them, as Regina said. So like the ones that you and Tim can talk about, like, okay, there's not really been a lot of action in this 8 years of this. So is there an opportunity in the next 2 years to take action on them? Otherwise, we need to just address it at the end of our tenure with this, that it's something that either it should be looked at or it's tabled, you know, for some other priority. Roxanne?
Yes, I was going to say that I know that the college, I believe, used to come to the town with I want to say a 5-year plan that they used to come to the planning department, I believe, with. So that might be something, as well as, I don't know if the hospital also has something like a 5-year plan that they could come and meet with you know, the planning department about. But I know that Curry used to have a 5-year plan, and I believe they still do. So I know it, one of the neighborhood meetings many years ago, they did talk about a 5-year plan. So I think they update their plan as well. So that's just another thought.
I'm sure they have plans, actually, Roxanne, thinking of that. So I do think that kind of outreach just for, you know, an update on where they are with their plans would be valuable. And to the extent that we can work with them, for example, the hospital, if we did a medical overlay, which would allow for medical office space, then they would know that the town might be interested in it, you know, because frankly, the memory care process, you know, and getting zoning for memory care wasn't an easy process. You know, it was a lot of meetings with the planning board and conservation commission and going to town meeting. And so, you know, it's probably better to get a pretty good idea in advance so that once you put forward zoning, there's support for it. So I agree that the master plan, their master plans or their strategic planning would be important. All right, so 4.1.7, this is something our committee's worked on. Create a civic center by better integrating existing civic core with improved pedestrian and other connections between uses and activities. So this is something where Milton doesn't have sort of a town center. This is what was talked about during the planning process. So we have things that are somewhat centrally located, but they're not always easy to access one from the other, like a sidewalk connection between the Council on Aging and the Town Hall. Connection, a convenient and safe connection from Town Hall to the library, for example. And so that was something that, you know, we talked about and worked on some when the Fire Station Building Committee came to us with their plans for the central fire station and what they were going to do with the parking lot and et cetera. We said, well, have you looked at it in relationship to the other users in this area? And so we led a process with MAPC on some high level planning on it. There's more work to be done on that. Let's see. I think I skipped 4.1.6, didn't I? All right, I'll come back to it. The most recent thing with the Civic Center is the library's need for additional parking and wanting to look at, and this is something Josh mentioned previously, and we'll talk about this at an upcoming meeting. So that's, unless there's anything else anyone else wants to say about the Civic Center, I'll go back to 4.1.6. Okay, all right, so the 4.1.6 encourage development of more commercial uses in other parts of town. There was some work done by a committee in 2014, so maybe right at the time this plan was adopted, on Granite Ave that was looking at commercial uses. The state was supportive of disposing of that property, but there was lack of consensus about what a good use would be there, and then the state backed away from that land sale. And so that was potentially commercial in another part of town. Another piece, I think, that we don't know whether any commercial will be, but there might be some interest in some small commercial in the western part of town, because we've heard people say there's no amenities or no services in that part of town. So there is interest in the planning department in working in this part of town, but that work hasn't gotten underway yet. We only have so much capacity with Josh and Tim. And then, but it's on the list for anybody who's paying attention and is interested in that part of town and the potential of some commercial. And this is really more neighborhood commercial, not large scale commercial. Okay, any question about that one? All right, so then we're going to go back to you, Dick, on 4.1.8, address parking issues and support alternative modes of transportation.
Okay, where do I begin with this? As I think I mentioned, I was a member of the Traffic Mitigation Committee, and we really haven't got not too much has happened with that committee as of right now. We've been talking for a while relative to who has ownership of this mitigation committee at Town Hall, and I think we were waiting for the new town administrator to be appointed and get his feet wet. So I think that'll be Nick's job, from what I understand in a conversation I had with Arthur, that he will have responsibility for this. I think that's a good first start. There's a lot of issues here, and I think it goes to, we don't have a traffic engineer, we don't have do we have parking enforcement? I'm not even sure we have anyone down in East Milton Square or down in Central actually ticketing anymore. So it's a little bit like a Wild West down there. Yes,
Dick, we have one. We recently rehired a single traffic enforcement person in the police department. So we had one before, We didn't have one for a handful of months, and now we have
Now
one.
we're back. Now we're back again. All right.
But one person can only do so much.
Well, I understand all that, and that's a start. But I think that as we get into some of these discussions, I mean, that's going to be important. You know, this has been an issue and a concern by a lot of people for a number of years, where I don't think we're much closer today than we were when we started talking about this probably 10 years ago. But having said that, it's a long process. We all knew that, and I think at some point we'll get through it. I think this East Milton study will be important as it relates to traffic and parking. And I think I'm cautiously optimistic we'll get to the bottom of this, but right now we're not there.
So on the other piece of this, Dick, the alternative modes of transportation, there has been progress on the bicycle pedestrian master plan. And then the Complete Streets program that the DPW is implementing through their grant funding. And then the East Milton Deck project, you know, that there are pedestrian and bike safety improvements there, right? With the crosswalks, the narrowing of crossings, the sequencing of lights, et cetera. So making it safer, as we've talked about, making it safer to walk and bike is a key component for having people actually utilize different modes of transportation.
Yeah, well, the whole test for East Milton is can people walk and bicycle there without getting killed? I think, you know, and that I think that we're not sure how that's all going to work out. I think we have I've seen a number of green stripes painted in some of the streets. Unfortunately, knowing that area fairly well, there are big gaps in between where the bike path ends and where the green stripes begin. So I think we still have some more work. I think we're a lot closer now than we ever were. I still think that enforcement is still an issue. I still see too many people running red lights, going to the expressway, cutting through. But that's, once again, this is going to come together as hopefully as we get there, as long as we all agree that this is something we want to do. And if we want to do it, and it's important to the town, we have to come up with a plan. We don't have the plan yet, but I know that Josh and Tim are going to be working on that with some other people on East Milton, and I know we'll come to grips with it sooner than later.
Roxanne, has the select board adopted the bicycle pedestrian master plan?
No, not yet.
Is that,
There's
you know, if that's on your agenda coming up sometime?
I don't know. There was a brief presentation. MAPC had come in a couple months ago to do it. It wasn't 100% complete yet. There are some concerns about certain aspects of it from a couple of our members. So, but they had said that the final was almost ready, but not quite yet. So no, I haven't heard anything more since that meeting.
And
Josh,
Tim
anything?
confirmed that is the same state of affairs as of the end of last week. So MAPC, you know, is maybe sort of being the George R. Martin on this front, but they promise they're still working on it.
Okay, so there'll be, I'm sure, follow-up study or follow-up application for grant money for implementation and so forth. It'll be a long implementation, I imagine, because it's high level, is my understanding the last time I saw a presentation on it. But the key to these plans is implementation, right? It's like the housing production plan, the master plan. These master plans are only good if we actually act on them. The traffic mitigation committee's report, Dick, you mentioned that, the town administrator. So maybe this plan will go to the town administrator as well. But I do think I'm one to see that things get implemented. We invest in these plans. We invest a lot of people's time and energy in participating, and people get frustrated when things don't get acted upon. So.
Well, I think that I've had this conversation with Tim about this. I said the really test of this is getting in his bicycle and driving down to East Milton Square and tell me what he thinks in terms of, his accessibility and how he feels as a true bike enthusiast, and maybe even throw, Jeff Mullen into this too, that people who, and then come back and say, okay, this thing works or it doesn't work. I mean, if people are not going to walk and take their bicycle to East Milton Square to relieve the traffic congestion and the parking issues down there, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time on something that is not going to be 100% effective. And I think
yeah.
we're close. We'll see where we are. I can be convinced I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important to see how families feel about crossing to get their children to Collycott and St. Agatha's, because that was a concern before for safety. Roxanne?
Yes, I was going to say that I think that sometimes with like this plan in particular, some aspects of it were good and some aspects might maybe not be appropriate. And so, to say that we want to implement this entire plan, I don't think is the great way to go about it. I mean, maybe there are certain aspects of things that we like and we want to try, and I think that's great. So I hesitate to say that whatever comes up that you want to implement the whole thing. I think it should always be in steps to see if it's appropriate at that time or to that area. And I think some of the things that they were focused on were like biking to school and things like that, which are very good. There were other aspects that were on either ends of the town that might be trickier, or making some streets one way. I mean, so it's a little bit more involved than may meet the eye, I would say. So that's why I would just hesitate to say that whenever we get a plan that we want to implement the whole thing. I think we really have to look at it and see what things are realistic and a good buy-in for people, and safety, of course, is paramount.
Right. I mean, I think the plan, once the town adopts it, the town doesn't have to take all of the recommendations, right? The town will take the ones that they agree with. And then once it's adopted, then I think you want to see it move forward. But some of moving forward might be further analysis, right? So before you decide whether you're going to do it or not. Like the master plan says, you need to do further analysis in Milton Village and East Milton Square and so forth, right? So like 3 years were spent doing further analysis in Milton Village. And I looked today, the planning board started with the ULI TAP in East Milton Square in 2018. So it's been 4 years of study in East Milton Square, and it's going to be probably 5 by the time it's done. But, so to your point, though, some things, may not want to be done that are recommended. And I think that's definitely up to the town to decide, whether that's the select board or someone else deciding about that. I don't know, but so point well taken, Roxanne. Okay, so are we ready to move forward to the next? Which would be 4.1.9, consider other ways of increasing tax base. So this has several bullet points, including identifying desirable locations for multifamily housing, pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes for the educational and medical institutions that was noted. And then something which seems using local museums and historic sites to create destination locations for visitors, which would then attract shops and restaurants. So I guess in terms of the tax base, we spoke about that a little bit before with the potential for small increased commercial. Milton doesn't have a lot of opportunity for large commercial. We have in our commercial business districts mostly small scale parcels, and the interest is having local business. But in looking at Milton Village, we discovered that largest taxpayers in Milton Village, for example, were Extra Space Storage and 88 Wharf. So multifamily can generate tax revenue as well as commercial. And so it'll be interesting when we did our analysis in Milton Village several years ago, Dick and Bill Clark had determined that using, I think it was 2019 or 2020 dollars, that through the build out of Milton Village to the level that would be the zoning would allow could have an increase in tax revenue of $500,000 a year. And so, you know, getting more, that business district right now doesn't generate a lot outside of 88 Wharf and extra space storage. There's very little tax revenue generated from that business district. That kind of analysis should be done in East Milton Square as well, because with these overlays, you can unlock economic opportunity, economic development opportunity in our existing business districts, which is something that most people, when you ask them about increasing the tax base and getting more commercial dollars, they don't necessarily want to do it everywhere, but the first places people think of are our existing business districts. So these overlays are important to that. Josh?
Just regarding analysis, Tim, in working with Alan Bishop, our GIS professional, has been conducting a study on revenue per acre as well as revenue per parcel, and sort of visualizing the tax revenue we get through those various sort of metrics. And so that is a study that is townwide and maybe informative, will certainly be informative as we move forward in East Milton Square. And so that, if that has not been presented yet, will be certainly a part of the presentation and how we think about the tax base in town.
Great. Any other thoughts about this? Okay, then I'll move to 4.2.1, which is develop a plan for each business district. They already spoke quite a bit about Milton Village. Central Ave has an overlay that has yielded 36 Central and the Hendry's building. So there are other parcels that could fit in under there. I don't think there's a plan or a thought that needs further work, but the East Milton Square district is definitely a focus. So I gave this a 50% progress met. Any thoughts or questions about this one? All right, then I'll go to 4.2.1. Sorry, 0.2, right? 4.2.2, develop beautification strategies. And this has to do with signage, design guidelines, design review board. We haven't established a design review board. We do have a sign, we have sign design guidelines and a sign advisory committee. And for Milton Village, the planning board just adopted design guidelines. And part of the scope for East Milton Square would include design guidelines. So I think that once we get East Milton Square complete, we'll be in good shape on that one. 4.2.3, identify and support redevelopment opportunities. And this has to do with the planning department working with landowners and developers. And I would say that that's currently happening and has been happening. I'm not sure, Josh, if you think there's anything that needs to be done further on this particular goal.
It's not been the focus of my work in the last few months, but I know it has certainly been, and Tim's been part of many of those conversations. So it is progressing as it has previously, though I cannot speak to it at present.
Okay.
Cheryl, I think Josh is being modest. He and I have had conversations relative to the potential development of the space down at the MBTA, the air rights above the parking lot there, which may be a interesting development opportunity that would generate some tax base and be consistent with some of the governors and certainly the state's interest in developing properties along the MBTA. So Josh, I think, you know, with his disguise on, he didn't want to take credit for this, but he's been dealing with one of the abutters who happens to be a developer who's interested in this discussion, which could be a pretty good, I think, jumpstart to some additional redevelopment down in Milton Village.
Thank you, Dick. Yes, I did discount that. There have been conversations between Planning Department with Hajar, which are the owners of the Citizens Bank building on Adams, and the MBTA on that air rights project, which has been moving forward. We're close to receiving to setting a proposal before the Traffic Commission on how parking would look through that air rights project. So that is certainly progressing.
Another question, Josh, is I saw maybe a couple months ago that the parcel, I think that was formerly a mill off of Truman Parkway, that was a brownfields, was for sale. Do you know what's happening with that?
I know the town has not bought it, but that's been on Tim's radar and part of this discussion, but Roxanne can maybe speak more to that.
Roxanne?
Thank you. So I'm familiar with it only because many years ago, there was a developer, an original developer that had that property and was going to develop it, brownfield development over there. And then there were issues, and anyways, it's another developer or another owner that has it. He's trying to sell it. I understand it's pretty high priced, but the main issue with it is that my understanding is that the land in front, which is on Truman Parkway, I believe maybe DCR, they own the land in the back, but there's tracks there and they can't get access rights over the tracks for the railroad. And so that was my understanding of why that particular parcel, which was the old paper mill, that's the problem, I believe, with that land. However, I was under the impression that the town had a smaller piece of property further down, closer to Mattapan on Truman Parkway. And DCR had another piece over there. And, I don't know if there's something that could be sort of, put together or something else, but the actual one that's for sale, I know there are issues with it because they can't get over the tracks. It would be a great location. You have the T there, the commuter rail, it would be great. But I think that's the problem with that one.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial if somehow we could find out whether it's sold, and then we could have the town at least have an introductory conversation with the new owner to see what their plans are, right?
Yeah, I don't think it has. I think that's the issue because you have to be able to get over the tracks. And
Right.
if the T is not going to let you do that, it's pretty tough. That was my understanding even back then, but Tim may know more about it now.
Well,
I'll check in with Tim.
Yeah, I think if it means working with DCR, maybe the town can help facilitate that. I mean, because that would be a place for additional tax revenue, right? Because it's not generating much now, I bet. All right, so that's redevelopment. The next one, 4.2.4, encourage and implement streetscape improvements. So this was encouraging merchants to form a business improvement district. That's something where businesses pay in and then they hire out to have things done. The one I'm familiar with is in Boston and Downtown Crossing, where they have cleanup done. They have, I don't know, ambassadors, if you will, who are doing things like beautification. So ambassadors meaning helping visitors find the businesses. Beautification being like regular turnover of plant materials and cleaning and so forth. So I don't know if the chamber has had any conversations about that, but it would require property owners to pay in. I understand that's the way those work.
Well, so you're talking about a business improvement district, and I think that's been, we've talked about that, but once again, it has to be, sort of a conversation between the town and the business district. as to what the town's going to do, what the business districts want the town to do, and what the town would want the business district to do vis-a-vis what we as residents and taxpayers want to see in a business district. So there's a couple of moving pieces here. I don't think it's impossible to do. I don't think there's a lot of business owners that would be against paying something, but they want to know, what is the town going to do? I think one of the big issues down there, obviously, is traffic enforcement and parking. So if we could deal with that, and then just general cleanup, which I think is very regular and logical, I think, for a town to provide in the central business district, then I don't think it would be an outrageous idea to approach the Chamber of Commerce and say, okay, now this is what you can do to help us make this a better business district.
I think it goes along with the next bullet point, which is making public investments. So one thing I'd say about the public investment, I know there's been some discussion about the MBTA communities and Mass Works grants, but the streetscape improvements that were done on Adams Street and Central Ave, connecting between Central Ave or down Adams from Central to Adams, were part of a Mass Works grant, and street lighting that went along with that. So that's that funding is one of the sources of funds that would no longer be available if we don't participate in the MBTA communities. That's getting looked at right now by the planning department. Other public funding can be through the Complete Streets program, I understand. So that it's not large amounts of funding. So the DPW has a plan, and they're implementing the plan based on the priorities that are within the plan. And then design guidelines for Milton Village overlay include streetscape, and there is a bonus built into that overlay zoning that a developer can get a bonus for public realm improvements. So that's a way to get some private monies to pay for public improvements. And I don't know if that's something that's going to be considered in East Milton Square, this idea of a bonus, but it's something that's included in Milton Village. Right, so any questions or comments about this? Okay, and then 4.2.5, increase opportunities for community gathering and recreation. The mention is reference in a bullet point to the deck. So the deck project's complete with the green space. I think the gazebo still needs to be built there, if I'm not mistaken. And then as I mentioned already, the bike and ped safety improvements in East Milton Square, and then the open space master plan that's beginning through the planning department. So I think that's in the works. Any questions or comments on this one?
I would also say that the Community Preservation Committee has received half a dozen different applications for various open space and recreation projects, including trail improvements around Turner's Pond and Pope's Pond, different recreational opportunities for pickleball or for a new playground. So there are also advancements coming through that committee and those projects that have been proposed.
Great. All right, the last one in our goal 4 is address parking issues. So I think we already have talked about that some. Parking management plan, though, is in the works in East Milton Square through the planning department. Josh, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. We said we weren't going to make you speak a lot tonight, and I'm feeling bad about making you speak a lot.
Well, thankfully, I don't have an update on that front.
Okay. Leave it, then I'll just leave it that it is in the works, and at least at the beginning stages. And that's my understanding. So we can get an update down the road on that.
There's also that Mass Trails program that we were awarded, which will be helpful in connecting the landing to Ventura Park in the city of Boston. So that's a trail connection.
Okay, back on the connection one, right? Okay, so that covers goal 4, promote economic development. So how's everybody doing tonight? Do we have any energy to go any further? Because what we're left with, and the reason I'm saying it that way is if we can do half of 5 tonight, then we'll do the other half of 5 and then 6 and 7 at our next meeting, because we need time at our next meeting to kind of summarize, because I need to deliver an update to town meeting at the December. Well, I plan to do it at the December. I suppose we could do it at the February town meeting, now that I hear that there's going to be one. So we can see maybe what I'll reach out and see if I can do it at February. That'll put a little less pressure on getting this done for December, and we can call it a night. What do you think?
Go for it.
And either way.
Okay. Let me just see what we have on 5 here. 5 is not too long. Dick and Roxanne mostly. And it is, let me scroll over here. Improve transportation and circulation. 6 is provide high quality public facilities, services, and infrastructure. And 7 is strengthen capacity to plan. I actually think 3 and 4 were pretty meaty in terms of topics, but some of 5 is, I think, a little redundant to some of 4, looking at the goals here. All right, did I have a consensus on what we should do?
I vote for charging through 5 if we can do it, like, and be efficient with it.
Okay, how about Roxanne and Dick?
That's fine.
That's fine.
Let's go.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna leave these up to you where your names are assigned. Instead of reading them, I'm gonna turn it over to Roxanne and Dick to bounce back and forth, except I have one here. How's that? That might speed it up.
Okay, so 5.11, identify a strategy for funding roadway and sidewalk maintenance improvements that can be implemented annually. So the DPW, they get grants. They also get Chapter 90 funding that helps with roadways and so forth. And they receive money through the capital committee. So they will put requests in, and sometimes the capital committee will approve those as well. So that's how they do that. So I think the started in progress met, and I think they all should be true
Okay,
at this point. I mean, it's continually every year that this is what they do. This is their process. Okay.
mhm.
5.1.2, develop a system to coordinate roadway and utility infrastructure projects to reduce construction impacts to roadway users. Town engineer and the staff meet with utility companies several times a year to align their roadway plans. So that's constantly being done. The next one, identify capacity and safety improvements needed at critical intersections and coordinate with MassDOT and DCI to fund projects on state-owned roadways in Milton. As you know, tomorrow night is the Route 28 Chickatobit intersection meeting. That's a Zoom meeting talking about their proposal at that intersection. So you might want to update that. I don't know. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Burke.
Oh, aren't you sweet, Roxanne? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm not sure what this is. I'm looking at.
I'll get to, I can read it for you here.
Oh, I can't, I can read it. I'm just trying to figure out what it means.
Well, what it says on the bullet point though, Dick, says explore providing additional funding for traffic unit staff within the police department. So I think that's, I would say that's done then, right? If they're staffing there now.
We're done. We're all finished. We're, you know.
Yeah, well, as long as we don't lose it again.
Well, I think the idea is at some point we have to look at if we're going to do a true traffic enforcement. What is an acceptable level of doing that? When do we want to do it? And does it make sense to see if we could put those funds into a revolving fund that would be able to pay for the work done by these people to do that work, which I think is important, and I think it's going to expand once Central Avenue and Milton Village really come online. We're gonna need and look for more traffic enforcement and a police presence down there. It's something that has changed over the years. I'm not sure I agree with it. We don't seem to be able to see the same level of visibility in our business districts, but I know there's a good reason for that. But I'm not sure that's something we should be striving to rectify with. And don't get me wrong, I'm not into just going out and just giving as many tickets as we can, but there's a reason for it. And if we can generate enough revenue to pay for these people and also open up space and increase parking accessibility, I'm not sure that's a bad idea. Let's see, identify, no, that's Cheryl, that's you now. No, well,
Richard, we have a hand raised from Roxanne and Elaine.
Hi, Roxanne. Hi, Elaine.
Hello. One thing I just wanted to add, I don't know if it's appropriate for that particular one, but I know that Senator Timilty was able to get additional funding for patrols on Route 28 and Route 138. So I don't know if that, I know we're talking more about neighborhoods and things like that. However, those main streets, I understand that they've been awarded money for extra patrols on those roads.
That's good news. Good job, Walter. Elaine, you had something?
Oh, I was just going to say, make a suggestion. That's a great addition Roxanne had. I was going to say that I think if you asked like any department if they need more staff, they would probably emphatically say yes. But perhaps this is something that we could reach out to the police chief and see, like how he feels in terms of progress on this one. It might be good to get their feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think that once again, I hate to use these words over and over again, but it's a coordinated approach. I mean, we identify the problem and then figure out who are the best people to be dealing with, and then figure out how to pay for it. And I think it goes back to something that Cheryl had said earlier in one of the bullet points. I think, one of the things we have to keep in mind is before we go back and ask people to vote for overrides and increase their taxes is a logical question that a number of residents would ask. I said, is the town doing everything that it can do to maximize potential revenue opportunities? And unless we can say affirmatively that's the case, it's hard to then go back and say, I want you to pay more in taxes. So I think we always have to keep that, at least I have to keep that in the back of my mind, saying, have we taken a look at every opportunity we can to make this thing better before we go back and ask for some more money? Because everyone, there's so many needs in this town for funding, and there's not a limitless pot of money here to deal with.
Good point.
That was my own editorial comment that no one really cared about. But anyways, let's move on.
It is a good point.
It's a good point.
I'm sorry. We're going on a rant.
All right, the next one, 5.1.5.
Yeah, the traffic commission, once again, we get into this thing, we did this study. It took about 1.5 years to get done. Everyone thought it was a great idea. And one of the things we all said, everyone on the committee, and it goes from everyone there, so we don't want this to be another study, an academic exercise that's going to sit in the shelf. What's happened is that we have a situation where I think, and a number of people mentioned this in the report, we need a traffic engineer. And it comes down to, how do we pay for the engineer? I think we go back, and Josh, you could help me with this. Didn't the town at some point, didn't we purchase some software, some traffic modeling software, or we have access to it?
Yes, it is an access. Our traffic consultants, Beta Engineering, have a traffic model for Milton that we can access, as if we sort of seek them for consultant services.
But also, didn't we pay for this?
We pay for access to their studies. We did not pay for
we didn't pay $40,000 for traffic modeling program, right?
I don't believe so, but that was before my time and
I
maybe better
want to
answers
check
to
with Tim
come.
on this, because I have that in my notes that we did. And now, if that's the case, and we just need, but we need someone to, not to take away the skills from our town engineer or the town planning department, but I think we need someone who really has some expertise in traffic to be able to take this to the next logical level and being able to actually do a traffic study in certain areas of the town, which piggybacks off of what Roxanne said with the traffic enforcement. And I think we've all talked about this as, you know, there's some things we just have to deal with, and we just, for some reason, we haven't been able to get it over the goal line yet. But we will. Right, Josh?
Nick, the new town administrator, is very fired up about traffic mitigation and is working on that as part of his first few days. So I'm sure we'll see more action on that front.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, so this one, I'll jump in on 5.1.6. The transportation need and gaps at planned development areas. In 2018, town meeting passed the traffic mitigation zoning, and if you'll recall that is triggered when a special permit is required for an overlay district, or in an overlay district, or when a special permit's required. That the idea was that traffic studies for smaller projects don't make as much sense, but when you put them in the aggregate, the small projects add up. And so that this is a fund, which the planning board can, in issuing its permits, can require a contribution to the fund. And then expenditures from the fund, I believe, require planning board and possibly select board approval. But it would go to studying mitigation in that area. So let's say it's East Milton Square, or let's say it's Milton Village. The funds would have to be expended in the area in which those projects are. So that we thought was a really good piece of zoning to pass. It addresses this pretty directly because the funds come from the developers, which is what was targeted with this. We haven't, I don't think we've seen any yet in terms of contribution. One of the things that I think the board went back to try and add was just permits within the business districts themselves, not under overlay, but just under the underlying zoning. And that got sent back for further study, and I don't think the board picked it back up, but that might be something to look at, picking back up. That's why it's not 100% well met. Okay, next, Dick.
Okay. Okay, I'm on improve pedestrian and bicycle facilities and ensure walking and biking are viable and safe options. I think the one that just jumps out to me is certainly East Milton Square. Just make it simple. We just have to, I guess all of us just have to pick a date to meet down there with our bicycles and work our way through the square to see how safe we think it is to going through. But I think that's going to be the real test. And I think that's something that's going to take a little work and a little time to make sure that people feel safe accessing East Milton Square from Adam Street, Edge Hill Road, Granite Avenue, all the different areas of the square. Because if that doesn't work, we have some work to do.
Yeah, one of the interesting things too is about, if you think about it across town, like, and I'm looking at some of the bullet points and talking about getting from East Milton Square down to the Greenway and to the transit lines. I mean, some of these are state roadways, right? Granite Avenue. And so I think the state was looking at adding a bike lane on Granite Avenue. I don't know where that is, but some of the major connectors, if you will, the roads are state. So Brook Road, there was some portion of it that was a bike lane was put in, right? Over by Pierce Middle School.
Yeah.
But these are definitely in the bicycle pedestrian master plan. So I think, you know, how many of these get advanced further, I'm sure will be a subject of some public discussion, as
Well, it should-
Roxanne said.
And it should be. I mean, we had the bicycle MAPC make a presentation to us, and the questions. I don't think the questions would really have changed. I think, we'll have to see this. We have to be stress tested. And I think it was Roxanne said earlier. I totally agree with it. There are going to be some things we like, that we're going to endorse, and there's going to be some things that we think need some work, and there are going to be some things that we think are stupid ideas. But the fact of the matter is, at least we have something to work with. But I think once again, there's an easy test of this. If you don't feel safe going where you want to go on a bicycle or walking, then we have a problem. And it's just not a collective problem. It's so many other people that we talk to, friends and neighbors, who will say, I wonder why something doesn't happen here, right? And I think that's what we have to keep our eyes and ears open to.
I was talking with someone recently who told me that her husband had ridden his bike to Mattapan Square Trolley, and they don't have a secure bike parking place there. And when he came back from work at the end of the day, lots of pieces of his bike were gone. And so that's another safety piece that we have to factor in. If we want people to take their bikes to the trolley stations, there needs to be a safe place to park them there. So I think that's something that maybe the town can talk to the MBTA about. So there's a lot
Well,
of.
to that point, there's an ongoing Mattapan line transformation process, and they recently presented on Milton Station and the sort of potential upgrades that they're planning to make along the line. So and bike storage is certainly part of that discussion.
Really good news. We should probably add that.
Yeah. So Josh, can you add that? I think you're on here with me too, right? You've got it open. You're taking, I know, detailed notes, so we can come back and fill in more of these boxes. So, but all right, we'll do that.
I'll
Then
update after the fact.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, because there's many bullet points under this one, and it's a lot of that is covered in that bike ped master plan. This one is near and dear to Dick's heart, I know.
Stop.
Wait.
You're killing me. No, this is right. Don't forget Roxanne.
I'm sorry, I'm missing Roxanne.
Roxanne,
Okay, that's okay.
not getting off the hook here. Come on. This is
All right, 5.2 to continue efforts to support bicycling for recreation, transportation, and commuting. I think we've already talked about this a bunch of times. The bike plan, bike pedestrian master plan was presented to select board, but it's not yet complete.
Okay. Roxanne got off the hook easy. Dick.
Oh, that was a snap.
Hey, that was
Okay.
quick.
And this will be just as quick. We've talked about this ad nauseum. This all sort of comes together in traffic, and then what it means and what we're trying to do. There has been I've been a part of a pretty good debate with some people over the years that, some people have said, the idea is to get people through the town faster. And my attitude is I want to get them through slower, so they have to find alternative ways to get into Boston if that's where they're going, or wherever they're going in the reverse way. I think this is part of an overall issue that's just going to get worse and worse for the town of Milton every day. And we've sort of we haven't kicked the can down the road since we have a plan, but we do have to implement the plan. We had a number of people, too many to even count, who volunteered their time to write up very involved critiques of the town in terms of traffic issues, and we really haven't addressed them. And I think that's a little disservice to our residents. They deserve an answer. They might not be the answer they want, but they deserve an answer. And I think we had in the traffic mitigation report a list of hotspots. We should just go through them one by one, cross that list of 20 off, and so listen another list of 20 until this is an ongoing process. And but we are going to have to deal with it. We're dealing with public safety. We're dealing with quality of life, And we're also dealing with potential economic development opportunities, which ties into a lot of what a master plan is all about. You know, what do we want to do in this town? How do we pay for it? Right? And unless we deal with both those two areas, identify what we want to do and see if we get some sort of consensus, and then come up with how we're going to pay for it. I said, then it's just another plan. So that's why.
Certainly quality of life and economic development are tied to this traffic calming.
I think so.
Because every development, large and small, that comes to the planning board, the feedback that we get from residents is related to traffic. And so they are intertwined and they need to be addressed as we've discussed at this committee quite a bit. So I think, Dick, if you can be in touch with Nick Milano about the implementation of this, and keep, you know, then we can at least keep abreast of what.
Yeah, I think I had a quick conversation with Arthur Doyle about this just the other day, and Arthur called me about this, and he knew this was an issue that I was involved with, and I said, when you formally talk to Nick and see if Nick would be willing to take this on as a responsibility. It's interesting, when we had our previous traffic mitigation meetings, we were talking at the end of it as to who was going to do the implementation, whether we're going to have a committee similar to this committee. And the former town administrator, Mike Dennehy, was a very interested and very involved party. He said, no, this should fall under the aegis or the responsibility of the town administrator, and we all agreed. And of course, Michael left, and then, you know, we waited a little while for Nick to come on board. And if he's willing to do it, he'd be a perfect person, because there's so many involved pieces of the town that would have to be involved, which I think could be just a logical person to have him do it. So when Arthur calls me, or Roxanne, you let me know if that conversation went on, that the Nick has agreed to taking this on. I think we have part of the plan sort of solved.
Dick, to that point, Nick, Tim Zerwinski, Chase Berkeley, and I believe Arthur are having a meeting either tomorrow or early next week,
Right.
specifically on this topic to finalize what that approach will be. So that's certainly ongoing, and it will involve planning.
Excellent, thank you. Good news. Okay, who's next? Is that Roxanne again? Roxanne, is this you?
Well, I thought, did you do the improved transit service?
Yeah, I did. Why don't you go ahead? I skipped that one. I don't know what to do with that one. So why don't you go do the next one? And we'll come
Oh, you
back.
want to skip over it? Let me do
Yeah,
the next
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'd do with this one. I don't know what I'd say about it either.
one. All right, 5.2.5, inventory current parking conditions in commercial areas and review current parking policies. So planning department has the parking management study for East Milton, MPIC, discussing study of parking at town center and the library, correct? Would that say that's accurate, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we also recently did a parking turnover study in Milton Village that showed a sort of peak usage at about 62% of available parking spots, confirming that there are plenty of parking spots available to residents at in Milton Village, but we still see some double parking or illegal parking, because the available parking is always the ideal parking, especially when we have the farmers market and people want to park as close as possible. So that also informed our discussion with the MBTA on that air rights project. So we're still very much continuing to do that work and that inventorying.
And the other thing to add is those spaces, we switched those over, didn't we, down at the wharf, that those parking spots, so they're public now?
So legally, service zone parking is public parking. So they're always public. They've never been privatized. The Milton Landing Committee voted to recommend to the Traffic Commission that the spaces at the lot that is known as 44 Wharf, which is the parking lot that faces the Neponset River, between the sort of boat ramp and Captain's Landing. The landing committee voted on that, and that's been advanced to the traffic commission.
Okay, I just didn't know where it was at this point. Great.
Yep,
thank you.
in the hands of the traffic commission, and then to you all in the select board.
Great.
I'm gonna jump back to the one that Dick skipped over, the transit. You know, the MBTA was impacted by COVID, and they've been impacted by staffing as it's been in the news. And so they've cut back their service, and they did change the bus routes. Tim has presented that to the select board and to the planning board. There's been a shifting of service. I don't think a huge reduction in service in terms of the bus routes. And then the other thing I'll point out is that the select board has sued the MBTA for the condition of the stairs at in Milton Village that lead to the Milton stop. One thing I'll just say is that if the state is going to mandate development near MBTA stations, they need to make sure the quality of service is there, and the facilities are there. And so I think, Josh, there was a meeting, I couldn't attend, but they had a meeting recently, and where are they with planning the improvements to this line? Transit line.
Yep. So they met early last week. I want to say Tuesday. I believe there was an elected official, potentially from the select board, present. The Milton Line transformation project is multi-year, obviously. Regarding Milton Station, their timeline is that they will have to do demolition of the stairs instead of repairing, because they will not sort of repair to non-ADA standards, which annoyingly pushes their timeline to demolition starting in the new year, and then reconstruction through 2023. Both Senator Timmelty and Representative Driscoll were present at that meeting and expressed their displeasure at that extensive timeline. The MBTA's reasoning was that the work that they do will have to be ADA compliant, which will involve elevator installations and other work. So they've provided quite a long timeline that will begin with demolition of the stairs in the first few months of the year, which is not what we wanted to hear. I can also send the slides and the recording of that session to you if you would like.
That would be great. Okay, with that, folks, we plowed through goal 5, and that leaves us 2 goals left for our next meeting. And it looks like Elaine, Roxanne again, Tabor and I have a few thrown in, and we'll get our way through it. Then I would be so happy to see Regina take a look at this. And well, first of all, Josh, you're going to plug in some more. The rest of us who have noticed things in here can plug in more. Everyone take a look at those 3 columns that say started, 50% progress, and goal met, because sometimes I think we've been moving along and haven't double checked those. So it would be great if everyone whose name is next to it will double check that piece of it, and fill in any other missing pieces. I think we've made a lot of headway in filling it in here and understanding it. And so I think if maybe everyone can think about the ones that we've already talked about. We already said tonight there were a couple that had very little progress made on them. And we might want to see from the last meeting which ones look like they're barely started, and see if they're ones that we think would deserve some priority in the next year or 2. Or otherwise go on to other ones that are so important, like maybe it's traffic, like maybe it's housing, like maybe it's something else, and pick out the things that we think deserve some attention, that might deserve some of our committee time, some of our committee funds. that might be managed even through a different board or committee. Yes, Roxanne?
Thank you. I wanted to know how much money do we have left at this point? And my second question is for Josh. Once you update everything, could you kindly send this out again? Because I want to make sure I save it so that I can work on it. Is that okay?
That's okay. Sorry, I'm just multiple screens. This updates live, right? It's online, so the changes made are automatically there when you're accessing it through OneDrive through your browser.
Right, but I like to save it so that I can quickly get to it and access this because I get a lot of, things. So is it possible just to send it out, I guess, one more time? Because
You mean
otherwise I
the-
have to dig through my stuff. I haven't worked on this in a little bit, you know what I
You
mean?
mean send the link again, Roxanne?
Yeah, I like to save it so that I can just access it quickly, the link or whatever. And then that way I can continue to work on it.
So as long as we're all working on the same file still, is all I'll mention, is like, right? So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think I sometimes too go back to an old email to get the link. I think that's what you're talking about, but we're all working on the same document. That's in that
Right.
one drive is the important piece, yeah.
And then I was wondering how much funding we have left, because you had mentioned funding.
Yeah, Tim needs to confirm that for me. I think it's approximately 20,000.
Okay,
And there's going to be some suggestion, about some use of that. But that's why I wanted to get through this before we make any
Mhm.
other commitments, other than
sure.
we have the matching fund that we did, the matching funds for East Milton Square. Is that correct? Josh, that's where the 10,000 went, right? Yeah, okay. Remember the grant application that needed the matching funds? Any other questions? Everybody clear about our plan between now and our next meeting and what we're going to accomplish at our next meeting?
Is the plan basically to go through the remaining 2 goals?
Mm-hmm.
But
And
then I'm kind of unsure, like, did you also want us to review? I mean, I add additional notes to previous ones that we've gone through, but were you also hoping for the next meeting for everyone to go through and highlight ones that were not completed, whether that be relevancy or resources or whatever the reason?
I guess what I was thinking is for everyone to begin their own thought process about what we think our next priorities would be.
Okay.
And one way I was suggesting it is to look at what hasn't had much progress made. But it might be that, we want to really target something else, right? There might be one thing that we think that really needs a lot of focus. So I want everybody to start thinking about it so that when we come together, we'll see where we're aligned, and where we might be differing, and then just talk through what we want to recommend. Does that answer, Elaine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just had a really quick question, Cheryl. You
Mhm.
started to say something that you wanted me to do. And so I wanted you to pick up on that when you have a moment. And then also, I noticed that all of the MPIC leads boxes are spoken for? Did any of is there anything in particular that folks would like to beg off of that I might be able to assist with?
Okay, so I think what I was initially thinking is if you can look at, you're new to it, right? You're absorbing the
Totally.
information. Can you think of a different way to organize the information, to have it read better, to have it clear for us to understand? So, as you do that, you're going to be getting yourself up to speed with everything further. I think that you could focus on that at least for the next meeting. And then once we start talking, and you can also look at what you think stands out at you or that you think hasn't been addressed. One of the things I want to get to sort of a next step is if we were going to suggest that the plan be updated, one reason we might suggest that is life has changed, conditions have changed since 2013 and 2014. Are there things that we are aware of that we think the plan didn't address that it might want to address in a revision? Are there things that there are certain things that are mandated to be in a plan? Okay, that's by state law. So I'll circulate that through Josh. I think it's chapter 40, or it's yeah, chapter 41, section 80D or something like that, Josh. I can send it to you. So it has to address certain categories. But and these goals all are within those categories. But for example, I'm just thinking, climate change, sea level rise, resiliency, sustainability, those are not green infrastructure. All of that sort of stuff is not really in this plan. And it's certainly on the top of mind in much thinking, right? Certainly in planning thinking, in terms of, we have Milton Landing that floods. We have, the Neponset. Well, anyway, there's lots of stuff that others you may think of too that's not addressed in the plan, and the staff may think of, and that'll be something else that we'll discuss, because that might inform us in our decision about recommending the plan be updated, right? But that's looking a little bit further ahead. First, I kind of want to finish this piece, unless anybody else has another suggestion. This is kind of what we had been outlining now for the last couple of meetings. Elaine, did you have something you
I
want
was
to add
going
to
to
that?
say, Regina, if there's any topics under the remaining two goals that are assigned to me, or if anyone else, they're welcome to, I can only speak for myself, but if there's any that you feel like, you'd like to take, please just go ahead and take them. You can put your name in and update. Happy to share the wealth.
And you can involve yourself in any of these. When we first did this, it was like, okay, who's the lead party? Who makes sense? Who's interested in this? And we just kind of divvied it up that way. And some of these may not be the best. All right. Anything else, anyone?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, then I'll take a motion to adjourn. How about you, Dick?
I will second that motion. I will make that motion. I
Is
will
there a
do both.
second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call. All those in favor, Regina,
Yes.
Roxanne,
Yes.
Elaine,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
and the chair, yes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.